In this episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, I'm talking with Mick Bainbridge and Paul James. Now, these two lads seem to have caused a bit of a fuss. You know, they're all over the media, particularly with their resignation from RSL New South Wales. And I've known these lads for quite a few years, particularly, as fellow veteran business owners. Heard a lot of stuff in the media, heard a lot of stuff from other people, but I hadn't had a chance to chat with them about their perspective and get their story. So thought I'd give them a bit of a spin. So stick around and have a listen to Paul and Mick coming up. G'day on this episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, the podcast for the veteran business community. I've got Paul Raymond James and Mick Bainbridge. G'day, lads. How are you?
G'day. How are you?
There you go, mate.
I tell you what, you don't mind causing a bit of fuss lately?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, Pete. I got to tell you, it's a hard thing being a veteran, transitioning, running a small legal practice as veterans, looking after a lot of veterans in our work life. And doing a lot of pro bono work, and then the added burden of volunteering at RSL, which is far more political than I had ever expected. But I feel like, unfortunately, we're the right people for the job, just the wrong time for the organisation. And I think we'll unpack that throughout the cast here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. There's three sides to every story. There's your side, someone else's side, and then probably somewhere in the middle. For me, I've known you lads for many years, probably 4 or 5 years now, with initial interest of, veterans in business, just birds of a feather flock together. There's been quite a bit of, I've actually had a bit of flack off people when I've told them I'm going to interview. Some people have a very polarizing opinion where they're like, these lads, you want nothing to do with them. At the same time, other people are like, you got to get back in and support these lads. For me, I am not a journalist. I'm just some random dickhead that talks on this side of the microphone. I just wanted to give you guys the courtesy after, being mates with you guys for this years to have a say and to share your side of the story. So there's some things in me that, like, having been around the RSL for a couple of years and having a tortured experience in being involved with RSL, to be honest, it is probably, I'm not saying there's not great sub-branches out there, but it has been a torturous, painful experience for me going to contribute. And I think someone said, RSL is a place where good intentions go to die.
I think that was me.
No, mate. Yeah. Well, let's just unpack a few things. So first of all, I'll go Mick first and then Paul. There's a whole separate talking about your military career and what you did in the army and all of that kind of stuff. But let's just do a quick overview of that and then get to more of some of the pressing stuff. So, Mick, where did you grow up and why did you join the army?
Mate, I grew up in southwest Sydney. I joined the army because, there was probably a lack of options for me at the time. I didn't do too well at school. I think I probably didn't understand the best learning methods for myself, and got accepted in to join the infantry, and then there was a direct entry course, and I got on it and ended up at 2 Commando. So I did almost 15 years, just shy. A few tours here and there around the place. Afghanistan, I did 4. East Timor was on Tag East. And effectively war service injuries, mental health and physical injuries. I've had a spinal reconstruction since getting out. I studied law and commerce and met Paulie, and we set up the law firm, and we've been going well ever since.
Like I said, that's a quick gloss over. 6, 7 deployments, 15 years. There is a multitude of stories to unpack out of that. But maybe some for another time. But at the same time, I don't want to dismiss or gloss over those experiences, because they are fundamental to who you are and why you're here.
Look, it was most of my trips away were kinetic operations. I did everything from a gunner on a vehicle to a mortarman to living with a warlord. Lost a lot of mates overseas, and a lot coming home to suicide. So I think that really formed my passion for RSL, wanting to do more. And I knew it was one of the oldest ex-service entities out there. And it's actually quite wealthy when you break it down, but there's so many politicised levels of RSL, even though it's supposed to retain its apolitical status.
Yeah.
Over 30,000 members, over 300 sub-branches across the state. It's fraught with risk. It's got lots of positions that are changing in terms of the membership has aged. They really want and need young members in there, but the corporate structure of RSL is very outdated. A lot of unincorporated sub branches. Each one has trustees. There's over 900 trustees in the entity, and no one seems to know and can tell me what the safety measures are to protect those older veterans that we're supposed to be caring for. And there's a lot of risk and burden for them. There's a lot of fraud risk within the sub branches. There's a lot of perplexing issues. So I think a lot of the passion of, I guess you call it the hatred, is when how dare any young veteran come in, and I say this with the caveat that I had a lot of amazing mentors within RSL that have done what we've done, just the older generation. But any young veteran, how dare they come in and break down the fiefdom and the little castle that they've built, even if that's happening. And I think there was a lot of misrepresentation in the media about what we were trying to achieve, but it certainly wasn't what was portrayed in the media. So we take the opportunity to say it.
It's funny you say that. In my second meeting at my current sub branch, someone called me out and they were like, "You fucking Afghanistan veterans, you're all short timers. You just don't have no patience." And this is my second time. I was like, "Oh, welcome." Let me just grab Paul for a sec. Paul, where'd you grow up? What's your connection to the military?
Yeah, g'day. I grew up. I was actually, I suppose, born into a military family. When I was born, my dad was in the Navy at the time. So he'd joined the Navy at 15 or 16 and turned 16 on the way up to, we went to Vietnam. He was a chief stoker, and I suppose I was always raised that there's only two people in the Navy, either those that are stokers and those that want to be. And I did Army Cadets, play football as well. But during the Army Cadets, it was like, I wanted to join the Navy, become a naval officer and all that. But after year 12, an opportunity came up to go to the UK, and I did a gap year, played some football over there as well. Came back to Australia, and I ended up at joining the Army Reserves back then. And this would have been right at the end of like 1997. And so I ended up doing the last Army Reserve recruit course at Club Bardia Barracks there. And it was before I went down to Kapooka, and I was in 1st 15th Royal New South Wales Lancers. So I did start doing Cav Scout kind of training, and I was going to go to become a driver, but then there was a change at the time, and they were losing that capability and going towards Bushmasters, and anyway, just because of where I was studying at the time, I ended up transferring to Sydney University Regiment, become a rifleman, turned 21 actually up on my up at Singo, and that was interesting. And then I was doing studies and had an argument with my dad one time, and my dad was by this stage in the police, and I think he said to me, he goes, "Oh, I bet you can't." I said, "Why don't you prove to me you can do something or whatever," or something like that. And I said, "Well, mate, I can be a better cop than you." So I ended up joining the police. And then I was in the police, and I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll transfer to the military police because I heard about it or whatever." So I ended up joining the military police, and basically I was a reservist for most of my time, except in 2009 and 10, I put my hand up. I was always one of those guys that was, you're at police, go away middle of the year, go and do the exercises. And I always had this philosophy when I joined the reserves was that I would do the job of the ARA while they went on deployments. But obviously over that time, there's a huge operational tempo for the ADF. So there was opportunities for me to do Op Resolute, which is, so I spent Christmas at Christmas Island, which was interesting. I mean, that was in 2009 going into 10. And then a few years later, 2012-13, I went to the last rotation of East Timor, so Timor-Leste with a handover. So that was interesting there. And so I'd always have this funny thing where I'd go away with the cops. I'd go to the cops. If I had enough of the cops, I'd go and do some army time and vice versa. And so never become a chief stoker, which I think my dad wanted me to become. But I did, at least I did some sea time. So it was an interesting experience with the boat people during that period. But yeah, so I suppose I could classify myself as like a super chock. But I never, I always say to my ARA colleagues and that, well, mate, I can do your job on weekends and I can do my job during the week, but you
during
can't
the
do
week.
that. So yeah.
Well, my simple opinion for the Veteran Business Community Forum is I don't care where you served, what service you served in, whether you're full-time, part-time. The fact that you served is enough of a. If you put your life on your line, that's what it's about. Lads, I just want to share why I joined the RSL. So I was living in South Coogee. For me, growing up in Katoomba, a couple of things that always stood out to me was on the school, for a school assembly, there was always the notice board of the people that were killed in World War I, World War II. And I was always really, interested in reading their names. As I've got a fascination about the cenotaphs. I love going to small towns and reading the names on the cenotaphs and seeing three surnames, three brothers or cousins or something in small towns. And for a kid growing up in small town Australia, RSL was always the hub of veteranness. I've still confused club and sub-branch, even though I know what they are, but in my language, I still use the club word sometimes because it's so ingrained into us. But when I got out, I was living in South Coogee. I joined Maroubra sub-branch. Really lovely people. They're really great people, but they'd sold their building and they had a fat lot of money in the bank. And I couldn't quite understand, again, this is the business side of me, why you would sell an asset and just have tens of millions of bucks in the bank earning 1 or 2% interest. And I was like, and then John Black, is that his name? Former CEO.
Yeah.
He rang me up and he was like, there's a sub-branch in the city that there is a club trying to buy it. Can you go in there and see if there's an opportunity to help Anzac House buy that building? And I was just like, well, that sounds pretty logical to me. I'd prefer the building not get sold like Maroubra was and maybe go to Anzac House. And the second I stepped into that building, I was like, it has been a torturous time. All sorts of open lies and fabrications about why I'm there, what I was doing there. And very interestingly enough, if me playing a funny game in the middle here, some of I guess is protagonist the word on 730 report, Nikita and Josh are two people I get on with really well in other parts of what we're doing. But less of me, more of you guys. What went wrong?
So that torture position you just discussed, times that by 314. And look, I would just say before we go into that, it doesn't matter in RSL. There's this weird thing in the veteran community. I think the term's akin to what might be defined as lateral violence, whereas it's where people turn on each other for no apparent reason other than they want to be heard. The irony for me is that a lot of the people throwing stones from the sideline don't have the minerals to put their hand up and take on the role. It's easy to criticise, but they need to jump in the arena and actually have a fair crack at it. So, funnily enough, if I did a speech and I got up and spoke and said, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I'd be attacked by a trans group for not acknowledging them. If I stood up and put a wreath down and didn't put my hand on my medals, I'd be attacked for that. And it was quite vitriolic going through it. And that surface level stuff led me to believe there was an issue. But look, the 730 report was one-sided. I want to be clear that I did offer them a live or recorded as live interview with Sarah Ferguson, and they refused that on several occasions. So there's not many.
Well, that's not what they said, though. They said they gave you the chance. But we all know from the Hesto thing about ABC, though.
I think any veteran that is up in arms about ABC or Channel 9 doing what they did with the alleged war crimes, they're up to the same mischief now. And sadly, it's a low tide mark for. I don't feel comfortable calling it investigative journalism, and I think Hagar and Sydney Morning Herald with Harriet Alexander were provided all the documents that they may have required to see the other side of the story, but they weren't interested in it.
I'd been involved in the RSL for many years. I mean, my dad's a life member, my grandfather was a life member, great grandfather was a life member. So for me, I've bled RSL for my whole life.
Yeah.
But that was an opportunity of doing something great, and I think, and look, at the end of the day is if I say to anyone out there, haters or anything, ask yourself, have these people actually sat down and had a coffee or a beer with me? And that's the first thing. As humans, I think you have to give people the you have to approach them. So anyone that knows me or worked with me, both in the especially my policing career, know exactly what I stand for. I rely upon facts and evidence. And if I see issues, whether it's fraud or misappropriation or whatever, I'll zero in on that and I'll get rid of that. There is a cancer, going through my dad went through the Bergen inquiry. What we've identified since being on the board, is far more extreme and a real and present danger to the organisation than anything at the Bergen inquiry. I can tell you now that is a fact. I mean, and on the clubs thing is, whilst people have their own different opinion in that, Mick and I don't hate clubs. A lot of stuff that Mick was done by head office. They would put out these press releases. They say, just say this or whatever, and it went out there. At the end of the day, clubs play a huge role in the community, and there's good clubs and there's bad clubs, much like sub branches. I mean, we've got a sub branch at the moment that's been identified, that is probably part of a criminal investigation, and it's one of many whereby we don't know exactly what they're now. Is it fraud? Maybe not. Maybe it's just complacency. But what we've done is, as an organisation, is since the Bergen inquiry, head office has spent tens of millions of dollars on their wages, on expenses, but failing the mere people that they're there to protect, which is the over 330 sub branches, the 800 trustees. They're the real risk. Not only are they, most of them, elderly, so that's a vulnerable class, they're veterans, and we've just been for the Royal Commission. So I think that if you look at all of this and we look back in time, is that our board did get along on a lot of issues. A lot of things were resolved in early 2024 anyway. However, you have a situation where there was a communication breakdown, and I think this is where everything falls through. We know in the military, communication is number one. And if you don't have proper communication to your different methods, well, you've got to bring people along. You have your CEO commander's intent. And we've always talked about on the board about bringing the members along. Now, sometimes the members can be wrong, and the board can be wrong. But who's also very wrong and hasn't been challenged in this case is management. And that's the thing. If you're on a board, I say this to anyone, do not just become a rubber stamp to your CEO or your management team.
I'd probably warn any veteran or any person in the community, if you're looking at an organisation like RSL that's designed for the care and welfare of veterans, and then when they get the chance to attack a veteran and they all go and pick up the pitchforks, you've got to be really careful about who those people are. It's sad to see the veteran community still going. So I'd always still sit down and have a beer or a coffee or a catch up, and I'll always help veterans. It certainly has been a learning experience with RSL, but there's systemic issues, and there's also a framing issue with how the media have gone about this. And I think it's fair to say now that the veteran community should rest assured that ABC and Channel 9 are certainly not working in anyone's interest.
At the end of the day is, I'm always open and transparent. I want to sit down with people. That's always how I was raised.
My thing is,
that's it.
All they had to do was pick up the phone, but they're only seeing a very small percentile, and I just certainly hope that those detractors put their hand up to take a leadership role, because I think
there's a couple of open board positions going at the moment now, I guess. So
well, I hope their names are on it. And look, and I do think that there's still a generational divide. My mandate for RSL was the same as you, Pete. As long as you're a veteran, as long as you've served, and our Vietnam era veterans say they had a really tough time joining the RSL, and I don't think that that's changed at all. And I think history is repeating itself for our young veterans, unfortunately.
I want to.
Now,
I was just going to say, Pete. Sorry, you touched on a part about and on the 730 Pro. We'll talk about. There was a document that was shown. If you want to, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but where I
is
had,
that the centralisation of assets legislation?
Yeah, if you want me to go that, yeah. So, according to the story, I suppose if you look at it, is that Mick and I, especially me, I'm the most influential person in the world. So if I'm on a board where it's split 6-4, even if I did that, how could I, and people have said, oh, they've spent months and all that. Now I can tell you for a fact that the reporter in that story was provided information beyond that. That reporter was provided information that centralisation, because we all remember so there was a thing that's been, it's still on the RSL website, one RSL. So John Black, when he was the previous CEO, he was at TAFE. He developed one TAFE. He then wanted one RSL. And part of that was with Morgan Stanley and everyone, if sub-branches out there, they wanted to pool all the money. And the idea was that you might have a 6% return as a collective because you got more money together.
More collective momentum by coming up together.
But then what he wanted to do was take 2% off that. So the sub-branch might get 4% and head office would get 2% to run their thing, all right? Just didn't work, whatever. So that's always there. I speak to, my dad was on state council since 2014 and the board. Previous before that, for over 40 years, you talk to any of these previous state councillors, centralisation's always been there. We've got sub-branches with money, sub-branches without. But what the issue there was there was, and even the decision to sell the Hyde Park Inn, which gets rid of one of your major revenue things by the previous board, and John Black CEO, I think John Black said, RSL shouldn't be in the business of owning property. We're not property hotels or we're property. Let's just divest all our property. I think Legacy did this many years ago, put all the money into a central fund, and then we just fund it. And you know what? Yeah. The sub-branches in the regions would probably have more money because they'd be able to deliver services. And then we got a presentation. Then on we had a board strategy day on the 8th of May. And basically the board got together. We looked at that. We had Derek Leslie, the chair of GPC. He was very well involved in this. He said, guys, we're going to get this done. We're going to get the legislation because I'm retiring in February next year. I'm out. That's a fact. We went through it. There was 2 board members weren't there because of one was away and one was ill. But we went through it and we all agreed that let's progress. This wasn't a final decision. This is like anything as a collective. You go, right, we've got let's go and see if this battle plans, like from that military point of view.
It's COA 1, 2, 3.
Go off and see, exactly. So then I spoke to the CEO, Giles Hurst and Mick and all that, and he said, oh, look, and there were some directors that were like, one of them, I think, was interested. She's like, oh, I don't know if the government can change legislation. So anyway, after a couple of whiskeys, a couple of beers, I thought, you know what? I'm going to produce something based on everything that they've put together. And I'll give this, and I spoke to the CEO, no dramas. So I sent out an email to the board. And with it was a document which I did on ChatGTP, and I've actually provided to the district president, I've provided the actual ChatGTP log. I mean, as a lawyer, I do use ChatGTP, but this was just like a bit of a gimmick, whatever. And I put it all together. Then what happened was, on the 26th, on the 20th of June, I had a phone call from the CEO, Giles Hurst. And in that phone call, he said to me, Paul, you've had a look at the board papers. And we had a board meeting coming up the following week, which was the 26th of June. And in there was hundreds and hundreds of pages. A lot of it was from Deloitte's, but there was all these documents from management, which included speaking points for government. It included a communications plan, consultation period, why the changes, things such as that.
Was that talking about centralisation as a key point then?
Yeah, that we have to centralisation, basically why we need to centralise.
So just on that note, so this is not a Paul and Mick going rogue trying to steal all sub-branches' assets.
No,
this is like, doing diligence.
Diligence.
It's doing diligence on a COA that's presented to you guys.
Yeah, exactly. And then what happened then was, Giles said, he goes, we've got to get the board on side. And look, I was at that stage, Mick, myself, and a couple of other directors, even some of the DPC people, we'll team Giles. So, so then there was an email where I'd sent out, and part of that email, which has strategically been leaked, not the whole lot, I actually talk about a vision. This is more of a vision. This is not and this is probably a 50 or 100 years where, you know, Pete, you talked about earlier about going to country towns, and you know how many we go to these regional towns where there's the RSL memorial pool. So after World War II, there was a lot of memorial pools that were established. And I've spoken to our local government. You know, I know down here at Shell Harbour, I spoke to a guy once. I said, "Oh, he's like, oh, I'd love to have a veteran hub." And I go, "Yeah, well, there's one at Nara, mate. You know, 5 million and that." And he goes, "Oh, well, do you think there's something we can do?" And here's a council that's got a growth area. There's a lot of young veteran families in current serving moving into the Illawarra in that Shell Harbour, Calderwood areas or whatever, where it could actually have a community pool where it may be, you know, RSL could put $1 million, local government puts $1 million, federal government, whatever. So you could have like a memorial pool or library, fitness centre, call it the Albert Jacker VC memorial thing, and basically give back. Because if RSL New South Wales has been given for years, it's a charity, it's raised money, and the goodwill of the Australians by giving money through donations and supporting those local sub branches has built up that wealth. And so as a taxpayer, you might say, well, why should law be taking? You know, if you look at other, like whether it's the Catholic Church, Anglican, all these other organisations, they build schools and universities and hospitals. And so I just saw this as an opportunity, and my vision was that, hey, RSL could, because we're not seeing new RSLs, Pete's, being established. We're seeing ex-services clubs or club, you know, such and such.
Yeah.
So where are these new RSLs going to appear? And so I thought about putting in these new developments. That would be great. But once again, it was a vision. Now, if I'm a minority member on the board, how can my vision become reality?
We were fed information from management, and once Paul and myself and the other directors started to interrogate that, we found out pretty quickly that for a group that hadn't completed any audits on sub-branches, we weren't sure how this information came to light. And we think that a lot of it was actually manufactured. In saying that, there's a base level truth in saying that the 30,000 members are aging, and their median age is, I think, in 75 or 76. So, you know, like they say, the worst course of action for RSL is no course of action. I know that
because it'll just die. It'll literally die.
Well, there's huge inherent risks with transparency, like Paul alluded to, and I'd said before. There's, you know, they're hemorrhaging well over $1 million a month, which is charitable funds. There's still a lot of assets out there, probably 400 odd properties, but the problem is head office doesn't have that money. That belongs to the sub branches, and that's where I'd really like to see it retained. But without new membership coming in, the sub branches can't sustain the positions they need to keep a running sub branch. So 3 trustees, an executive, and it's a big burden for people who are older. The other risks are there's a digital risk, there's a cyber risk, there's a huge cyber risk for RSL at the moment. So, you know, the centralisation was a way to mitigate risks for those members, so they could go to a sub branch and get all of the good things out of being a sub-branch member without necessarily having the burden or risk of, you know, doing something wrong and losing their personal assets or their home. So it did come from a good place, but I think that there's just so many decision points that people are probably unaware of. There's so many vexed positions, and when you're on these roles, sometimes doing 5 days a week as a volunteer, there's a lot of other ex officio roles that you have to fulfill. So I think that the modernisation needs to look at what young veterans need from RSL, not as well as the existing membership. So young members are less inclined to go to a club and drink beer, or go and sit on the pokies, or even go for team biscuits if they've got young kids or they're a single parent. They want to go to a gym membership. They want to go to a catch-up. So I think RSL really needs to have a good hard look in the mirror and see what it needs to do. And my fear is that, being one of the youngest presidents that stepped up into the role, like I said, it's easy for people to criticise, but I'd like to see any other veteran that has transitioned from defence, runs a small business, and can commit 6 months of their working year to a volunteer role. It's a really hard position, and I really hope that this past incident hasn't scared off young veterans from being involved and progressing, you know, young veteran interests within RSL.
And
Well, it certainly scared
Yeah.
So certainly scared me off going for a board
Well,
position.
no, like,
and that's the thing. In these organisations, you have I think we've spoken about it before. On one end of the spectrum, you've got people with lots of time and no skill to offer the organisation, but they're fantastic members and they go out. And on the other side, you've got people with lots of skill and not much time. And I think that the real risk is now that the people with the skill, why would you become involved in a political hotbed? I know the media said that I was politically affiliated. I'm not a member of any political party. And ironically, the role of president is to lobby government. And I feel like I did a pretty good job at that. But when it comes to egos at board level, I've certainly learned a few lessons at where people are, I think there needs to be an involvement. It's not like a normal corporation. If someone wants to be on the board of RSL, they should come and serve the membership as a sub-branch member, a sub-branch executive member, and then the district members, and then
learn the process.
If they parachute these, I call them, CV stocking stuffer, political aspirationist sort of group, parachute into the board, they don't know their head from their end in terms of the membership and what the membership needs. And they've got this, fanciful vision of bringing young members in, but there's no incentivised position to bring them in. And we know that there's an air gap, and it's critical that we keep regional sub-branches running because a lot of young members leaving defence can't afford to buy in Sydney. So
there's a couple of things I'd like to just pull out of that. So first of all is, and I don't know why. Okay, number one, we talked about it before. People who are passionate and caring people who join the sub-branch movement. Okay, without doubt, you are absolutely passionate about supporting it and continuing that legacy of service in you're looking for another vessel to do it through. And RSL makes such a perfect, again, I'm a very simple dude. It just seems to be an obvious way to express that. And I don't know what it is outside of military structure or hierarchy where this sort of vitriol comes in. Like I attended a sub-branch meeting yesterday, which was disgraceful. And I often get asked, why aren't you bringing younger members in? Where are all the people you're bringing? I'm like, I'm not bringing them here. Fuck no. Why would I torture them by bringing them into this participation? One of the things that, I'm really interested in, particularly about the assets, and I am overtly, and I'll declare it, I am overtly interested in the RSL assets and they being protected for the future of veterans over the next, 50 years, 100 years, lifetime. And this is why I did join, because I didn't want to see Barrack Street get sold. Why lose the asset? Now, what I want to understand here, when it comes to me, but my, again, very simple dude talking about centralization, if you have people that are managing large assets and they don't have business acumen or skill, they've got lots of time, maybe not a lot of skill, they're not experienced in this, we are at risk of losing the legacy of those assets. I do believe when you've got competent, effective sub-branch boards, and run your own stuff.
Well,
there's vultures out there.
There are fantastic sub-branches out there. But, as you know, we've all come from the military, you have to cater for the lowest common denominator. And unfortunately, that lowest common denominator is pretty bloody low. And you're right about the assets. Paul's right about not being in the club business. We're a separate entity. The one thing the clubs have done extremely well, and I have to stress, they are a critical part of the community, the fabric of our communities. They fund sport, they fund community initiatives, and they get tangible outcomes. The difference between them and RSL New South Wales is that they have a sustainable business model. RSL New South Wales is in a position right now where they don't have DGR status, so no one can give them money and get a deductible status on that. So they've got no income deriving assets and they've got no sustainable future. So in June this year, they were in a $2.5 million deficit and their wage bill was approaching $7.8 million a year. That's not a sustainable model.
This is the Veteran Business Community Podcast. This is, there are some basic principles of business, and this has been part of my frustration.
And I think this is it's a bureaucratic way to look at it the way the management have. You can't just keep walking around with your hat out to sub branches and expect old Bob and Mary from the auxiliary to be selling badges. My position, and I believe Paul's exactly the same, is if there's one charitable, it doesn't matter if it's one charitable cent or $1 million charitable dollars, that charitable money has to go to the charitable purpose. It can't just be absorbed into an operation. And, Queensland RSL do a fantastic job. They've got the art union prizes. It's an incredibly complex business model, but they have sustainable funding now, and they've done a fantastic job. And New South Wales is my fear, and I was a veteran before I joined. I'll always be a veteran. I'll always be a member and be passionate about RSL, is that over the next 10 years, the membership will decline because of the age. It won't be replenished by younger members anytime soon, and those assets will just keep dwindling off. And if no one's managing those assets and doing joint ventures with developers and building sustainable long-term income, then unfortunately, I don't think there's much hope for RSL in the next 10 to 15 years.
And I remember the ACNC, they did an enforceable undertaking. They came in and they were shocked that RSL New South Wales had over 300 unincorporated entities, over 800 trustees. And so some of these trustees who are in their 80s are managing $14,000 in a savings account, because that's all the sub-branch got. Or you've got other rich sub-branches with, they sold their building back in the day and they've got $30 million in investment cash assets, all right?
Yep.
So you've got this and it was pretty much a situation where when the management came on or whatever, there was a period there where they spent a lot of money on wages. There was a lot about doing nothing. So when you look at the tens of millions of dollars spent on wages and expenses and that, and you've still got sub-branches collapsing, and the sub-branches that are dying or falling off aren't the ones with $30 million. There was one sub-branch that was had its charter removed for misconduct, and they had about $4.5 million in their account. That $4.5 million was raised by that people in that local area for that sub-branch, all right? They probably obviously sold a building once upon a time. That should have stayed in that area, because whilst there was a few bad eggs in that executive and they were removed, they're still sub-branch members. And there was an option for the RSL to give that money to a nearby sub-branch, a larger one that would hold that money on trust for them and allow those members to still go and do coffee catch-ups, to still go and do memorial services. But no, what management and the board does is take those charitable funds, pull them into town head office. Now, they could have gave that $4.5 million to RSL Life Care or a charitable purpose. But no, those charitable funds that going back to that bucket has now been tipped into wages and expenses. Essentially, there's a number of issues whereby what it looks like, and I can say this, is that RSL New South Wales has things like the Anzac House Trust, which is like public money that was raised in the 40s. It was for an Anzac House building. In 1972, there was a trust deed that was finalised to basically, and RSL's involvement was, well, you're the largest ESO. You just have you provide the secretariat and you be the custodian of that asset. What it looks like is that RSL has used that for their own benefit. And since they sold the Anzac House, I mean, we're looking about $8 million has gone in rent. That $8 million in rent since 2016 or 17 when they sold the old building, that could have been towards doing a joint venture, say, for instance, with Combined Services at Barrack Street, developing a beautiful Anzac House. And we're building like it's like building a church. I don't care the value or whatever, but you've got a beacon of the city for sub-branch members to come to. That trust was also supposed to house Legacy, War Widows, and all these other ESOs.
Yeah.
So Legacy and War Widows are paying rent. Whilst RSL New South Wales, with collectively $1 billion, their head office is now doubled their rent, gone to a new building without declaring conflicts of interest, and still expects this government trust of public funds to pay their own rent. It doesn't make sense. And if you're going to do it, at least do a business case.
I think the problem is that it's always going to be hard to pass the pub test because obviously we're passionate volunteers. But it's really hard to see a management team growing ever larger at RSL. they're ever more disconnected from their own veteranhood and veteran community because they're not employing veterans, so they should be setting the example, and their expenditures through the roof. So, my passion goes back to my one key goal was to make sure RSL lasts another 100 years. And, I think a good position is that not all veterans will be happy. I just hope that the ones that are aggressively passionate about these positions take the time to look at the facts and perhaps not believe all the rubbish they read in the media. But also don't jump on the back of that to further the cause, because regardless of our differences, the one common thread that ties us all together, whether we disagree on things or not, is that we're all veterans and we should all be there looking after each other and looking after RSL as a collective.
The one thing I really want from my service or my contribution into the sub-branch level is a place that I feel welcome. It's a place that I enjoy. And because my experience has not been pleasurable at all. From that initial insult of, you're a short timer, I did 11 and a half years, not that short in my insignificant life. But what I really feel is there's just so much. Okay, I'm going to switch tact a little bit here. I feel like the place needs a healing, some kind of, and maybe you guys could be the circuit breaker of that. Maybe you standing down is an option for healing, because 6'4", you've got your vision, Paul. Other people got their visions. Doesn't mean that anyone's right or wrong. It just means that we've got different ideas. And the sooner we start shutting down ideas, like I'm not against centralization if it protects. And again, I'm a simple person. I see RSL as one, and I don't actually understand a lot of this sub-branch versus district versus headquarters. For me, it's like, well, my section's better than your section. Company headquarters always fuck shit up. Battalion headquarters is always fucking everyone up.
Yeah, I don't personally feel that centralisation is a model they need. They just need better support and critical support for sub-branches who are in need, to make sure they put the staffing allocations into helping them manage their assets and their
but we've got the assets to do that.
Well, that's correct.
Got the assets to do it.
But like they say in defence, 6 one way, half a dozen the other. I hope. Look, I want to be clear. We resigned on our own terms because we knew we had the numbers. We knew we were going to win. But we made a decision that RSL is bigger than us. But also, you've got to ask yourself, and we do it with clients often in commercial matters, what does winning look like? For me, winning doesn't look like bearing the cross and getting our way and then spending full time the next 12 months as a volunteer while our business withers on the vine. So, it's not our cross to bear. We've done our best. I'm still proud of what we've done. I don't see it as a failure at all. I think that these issues are systemic and they will continue on. And if there's a government inquiry, which is my hope, I think there's a lot of structural change that's required at head office, and they need to remove that distant, corporatised, McDonaldized version of management away from RSL to make sure it goes back to supporting the members. So Paul and I had the drive to keep supporting members, but regrettably, you just can't run a business and be a dad and do all those things that you need to do whilst the RSL takes up. The RSL literally took up more time of mine and Paul's than what it ever did for me in Afghanistan or service did like that. So I just hope that it hasn't scared off the newest generation. I like to think that we've set up a bit of a beachhead, but I'd be disappointed if the naysayers out there don't put their hand up and put your money where your mouth is. Get involved.
It's not in crisis. I'll say this, and I read. I'll send it to you, Pete. I got a copy of the minutes, the word by word minutes from their first national meeting gathering in Melbourne in 1916. Yeah, and that you read through that. The only thing, and I've got copies of the digital copies of the Revallies going back to which is the RSL's New South Wales magazine, going back to like 1923 or something. The only thing that's changed over time is, well, one, there was more transparency in those old Ravellis, like you knew everything. The modern one we've had issues with. It's a glossy mag. It's not much about do anything, but anyway. But nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is houses prices. RSL was always involved in the political sphere, and so we've always represented Team Veteran. It's never been Team Red and Blue. I mean, there was periods there, I suppose, against the communists and that kind of stuff, where the RSL really try to protect it. But like most member-based organisation, it's always been passionate. Now, I always say, I've said this before to you probably, is that the only union in the army is the rugby union. And the interesting thing is that for a member-based organisation and any unions, once the executive of that union starts to move away from its member-based, it loses that support. I think members have never really trusted Anzac House or head office. There was a lot probably more buy-in years ago. But I think that's a reminder, is that the members, if you're on a board, and I'll say this before, is that the members know a lot. There's so many, and Mick and myself and a couple of other directors who have now left, I go to sub-branch meetings, not just my own, but others. Down in Wollongong here, they've got an amazing monthly Sunday Fun Day, which has that grassroots where people can turn up for a coffee. Some people get up earlier and go deep sea fishing with their kids. Other people go for a run. Other people go for a walk. So it's kind of like, rather than just having, we're going to have a touch footy day, because touch footy would be limited depending on your physical age and all that kind of stuff and abilities, it's like a package day. So it's like, we're all going to meet at this coffee shop at 10 a.m. or 12 o'clock. Some people start earlier because they're doing a marathon. Other people are slower walking, whatever. But it's basically saying, let's get out and about. And the sub-branch down here at Wollongong, I think are really proud. I think they'll be announcing soon. It's called the Local RSL. And what that is connecting to the local community, because we're no different to the football club, the surf clubs, everything. And I think any veterans, if you're looking for connection, you can find, but you're probably not going to find it really in some sub branches, because one, they're meeting at Monday morning at 9 a.m. while you're at work. So when my dad was state president, he would say to people, why are we going to get people? He goes, well, put on a barbecue. Or why aren't they coming to our meeting? Well, it's 10 a.m. on a Monday. And then when you talk about investment, what RSL is that you need that entrepreneurship. And when I talk about this is property, Mick and I have spoken to some sub-branches and in clubs who are like, imagine if RSL collectively developed, we've got the Veteran Support Fund, and there's different buckets. Some assist sub-branches on different activities. But there may be a RSL property fund whereby sub-branches with the 30 and 25 million can take a few of those millions and assist in collabing with RSL to purchase properties, both in New South Wales or interstate,
or even buying defence housing properties for income and sustainable outcomes for veterans. So, look, these are all the things. And look, what Paul and I have realised in making the decision to leave is that our little practice, we've always done pro bono work. Last year we did over $300,000 worth of pro bono work for veterans. And that was one of the criticisms, sadly, from some disgruntled members on 7:30, saying that we're conflicted because we act for veterans. And we said, yes, well, we do act for veterans. We are veterans. And they wanted us to provide them with the details of those clients, to which it was a solid no. Confidentiality is paramount in law as a practicing solicitor. And I felt like they wanted us to do well, but no one likes you doing what they perceive to be too well. Fortunately, we've come back to the business. We're going to keep building. We're going to keep growing. We've got a fantastic team. We've got a team of amazing solicitors, and we're going to keep helping veterans when we can, and when the opportunity presents itself. Funnily enough, our small business does more for our local community of veterans, and tangible outcomes we achieve are really where our heart is in terms of still continuing to help our community.
I've got two. Sorry, Matt, I don't know if you wanted to know about that. I can go through to that conflict of interest issue. I mean, that's another big thing, and we've tried to say this publicly. It's complicated, but it's not complicated. I deal in in my life as a solicitor, but also previously in the police, I deal on facts and evidence. As of today, which is what's today, whatever we're recording today, like in October or whatever, Mick and I and our lawyers have not been provided any facts or evidence that confirm that we breached our conflict of interest. If that was the reality, one, what's the ACNC doing about it? What's ASIC doing about it? And any other regulatory authority. The fact is that when our lawyers asked for that evidence to be produced, it was never produced. There's actually an investigation report that has never been, the investigation report has never been viewed by any board director or even the District President's Council. All that was being put around is high level legal opinion. And basically, even when you read that, it doesn't say that we did it. And it's very, it's a subjective, non-evidence-based outcome. And that's why it is frustrating, because we know the truth. And the fact is, we've always managed our conflicts of interest better than anyone.
I've had a couple of people ask me about this, and again, I'm a simple person. My attitude to this was, if it's there, it'll be found and they'll be held accountable. It's that simple. Exactly. So that's literally what I've said to a couple of people. Like when they're like, "How can I do this? How can I do that?" I'm like, I don't know, I don't understand, but it will come to the surface if it's there.
If there's an inquiry, all of that will come up, Pete. Look, other examples are, like I've said, I'll always be a veteran. But when you have the former chair of the board saying, if you're acting for veterans, you need to tell us, and we say no, I'd liken it to the president of the New South Wales Law Society is also a partner at Clayton Utz. A doctor who is the head of the AMA is also a doctor. They're never expected to give their client details up. Confidentiality is paramount.
Funny enough, I was actually told that I was conflicted running the veteran business community because I'm a veteran business owner. I'm like, that's the whole fucking point.
Look, bureaucracy will slowly kill everything in front of us. And look, all we can do is do our best to help veterans, be honest, and act with integrity. And that what's not being portrayed in the media is that I've moved several motions to record board meetings and have open and transparent board meetings where members or anyone can watch them online. That they were rejected. They didn't want recording of board meetings. I've put up every conflict that you could imagine. I've probably over-conflicted myself, and the same as Paul. But look, everyone loves a good story. I just hope that people take us for what we are, and they can see that we've thrown our hat in the ring. We've given it a crack. We've acted with integrity. The RSL hasn't seen the end of us yet. One day there might be a return. But I think I would do that, when I'm much older. But right now, it's just focusing on our business, fantastic business, and also focusing on family. It's people throw their hands up, they jump out of the clown car, they yell conflict, and they run around. But when you press them to articulate the conflict, because in reality, conflicts are normal. They happen everywhere. And sometimes people don't identify it, and you look to your teammates to say, hey, look, have you thought about this? Or, and you address it appropriately. And appropriately means that you declare it, you step out of the meeting for that position, or you remove yourself entirely from it. And look, it happens all the time.
Identify, declare, and manage.
It's not something for anyone to be scared of, but the manner in which they'll addressing conflicts, saying you're conflicted purely by being a veteran or purely because you've been through the DVA process. And that's another thing too. Look, I'm unapologetic for our firm and its advocacy for veterans, and we always give submissions to Senate inquiries. The most recent one is advocacy in the veteran space. We have advocacy here at Operational Legal Australia. We're bloody good at it. We're bloody cheap, but we do more complex advocacy. So people that are going through family law matters, or perhaps merging interests with NDIS, and we do those matters brilliantly. And, for years we've advocated to regulate, ensure, and provide consistency and qualifications for that industry, and it hasn't been happening. So, the most recent Senate inquiry, we made a submission. Again, we will attack. We think that there's a more sustainable approach, but to be criticised for all of that, all of RSL's submission was around advocacy being free, but not one of those advocates or ESOs has stood up and said, "Hey, the new changes to MERCA, create an inequitable position for people going through family law matters, or there's unintended consequences or detriment." So we dip right into the legislation and we identify those issues, and we'll continue to go to government to advocate for those outcomes.
I've got a couple of things to mention about paid advocacy in particular, is because there are some great members of VBC with paid advocacy businesses. My simple position on that is I don't see a problem with choice and people who have the choice. Like, technically, you guys are paid advocacy just in a different form. There's other specific businesses, but we've just got to be careful again. But I am really, there is a lot of sharks in the water out there. It comes down to who's protecting and looking after the vulnerable veteran.
And it goes back to North Bondi. When I did the Bondi Junction Centre, as a law student, I was interested, it's a weird situation. In our paper, I titled it, "Why is Parliament treating veterans as second-class citizens?" Simple example is that Mick and you, Pete, go overseas, you get injured, you come back to Australia, you're encouraged to go to a volunteer advocate who might be willing, used to be the old veteran, who'd know the scheme, whatever. Or now you're online because there's a lot of providers, and it comes back to choice and all that. What I couldn't understand is if I was injured at a forklift accident in Western Sydney, I could go down to a lawyer down the road
as a civilian,
civilian. So they're all regulated and all that. So part of our paper is that we think it's an ecosystem. We actually proposed a qualification, which we did with they did it with the migration area. So there's migration agents. So even lawyers have to go and do certain qualifications to do it, and you have people that aren't lawyers. So it's like conveyancing. Conveyancers can do basic transactions, but they can't advise you on property stuff, and that's why you have a bit of a hybrid there. But with us, with workers' comp, it was just like, well, why don't we pay it? Now, everyone, there's no such thing as free advocacy. And the reason I say this is that I know RSL Victoria, they put some stuff out there. Well, their advocates and their wages are funded by gambling, because they are one and the same down there. So all the money that they had is either from, and it's the same as RSL New South Wales. Yes, there are volunteers and they basically just run on the smell of an oily rag, but someone's paying. Or it could be some of those advocates, especially in the ESO movement, are actually on TPI pension. What we're seeking for is a better regulation, better training, coordination, and a system whereby there might be a central insurer funding it. So therefore, fees are capped at a certain amount. And like with the workers' comp, we include the New South Wales regulation, which, for basic stuff, it's all set. That way, no veteran's actually paying, but then also people can't manipulate that. But at the same time there are great advocacy services that we know out there, and they're well intended. But this is a failing, I think, is don't blame if we were to say, like we've been called, was it unethical cowboys? I think if you look back at history, cowboys technically would be unethical. So I'm not sure what a double.
Yeah.
But the thing is why is the system allowed to go like that? Who's been in charge? I mean, these advocates, like some of your clients or your people that are part of the VBC, have only done it because there was a need. They might have saw the need, and the market has adjusted. Which is, are we anti-competition? Do we want to socialist communist society? I don't know.
As solicitors, Pete, we're in one of the most heavily regulated industries or professions in the country. So we get audited. We've got a law society. There's a legal services commissioner, and there are fantastic advocates that are fee for service out there. And I really dislike the way Veteran Affairs says, "Oh, well, they're out there." The problem
they're all
is
thrown into one basket. Yeah.
I raised these issues with DVA back in 2017, saying that you're creating a free market that is going to thrive. And that's because DVA wasn't managing claims. Now, even as solicitors, we deal with delegates from DVA that are just completely wrong. They misrepresent the SOPs. They misrepresent injury positions or the history of each person, and we get those claims through. So I think any advocate out there, whether they're fee for service, we're not attacking other advocates. I think that there needs to be more regulation and consistency in that market. But the free market exists for the very reason that DVA hasn't done a very good job.
There's a demand there. And on that regulation, most of the people that I've spoken to from the veteran-owned advocacy services are all for it, because they go into these business wanting to protect and do the right thing. Hey, lads, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring us back from the advocacy tangent and wrap up with a couple of points on RSL. Firstly, I just want to share like my vision for what I would love out of my little sub branch. So for anyone who doesn't know, there is a building 5 Barrack Street in Sydney that is like 1 block from Martin Place. It's 1 block from Wynyard. It is the most, well, it's a shitty building, but it is in the most amazing location. And my vision is that that location is protected for the veteran use for the next 100 years or 200 years. It's not my money. It's the money of people that have gone before us that have now got an asset worth, 20, 25, 30 million bucks, whatever it is, for the next generations. I'd love that sub branch to be the home for veterans in the city. And whether we can home Anzac House and War Widows, whether there's one place in the heart of our biggest city that veterans feel welcome. If you've got a flight in the afternoon, you've got a couple of hours to burn, there's your place to go. That's where you feel like. If you're a veteran living in Los Angeles and you want to keep connected to the RSL movement, well, let's embrace a digital membership where you can still contribute and get involved. I see it particularly as a place for the older veterans of that sub branch to honor and maintain their legacy of keeping the place open for the next place. But the only thing that matters about that place is, are we focusing on supporting our community and the charitable interest and good governance to do the right thing with money that does not belong to us? We're just entrusted with it.
Like I always say, we are but custodians of the RSL and its assets. And I think too many people have been around for a long time. They tend to view those assets as their own. That's on both ends of the spectrum. Some sub-branches see it as their own, and head office sees it as theirs. So I think the quote that I've used sometime, vigilance is eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, which is the RSL tagline. What people don't know is back in the 1800s, a fellow by the name of Wendell Phillips, there was a second part to that, and it's power is ever stealing from the many to the few. And I think that as long as the membership stay engaged and protect those assets, but I do think there needs to be a future vision for a lounge like what you're talking about and a veteran hub and a co-locating of legacy, War Widows and RSL. But, for now, we're going to stick to our local area in Wollongong, and the sub-branch members there, we've had nothing to do with that sub-branch other than the management from the board level, but they have golf lessons, they've got exercise phys people, they've got great events, they've got young veterans with families that go and meet. And that, for me, is what RSL, the core of RSL is about.
And they support veteran businesses. But going back to your Barrack Street, I mean, I can tell you now, Pete, there is visions. There's been, you're probably aware, there's been some mock-ups of what it could look like and visions. There's, and look, I would love to see whether it's 14 stories or whatever. I mean, what you're building is a church. I think there were some people at RSL before I got on the board, and the management was like, if we spend $50 million or something, but it's going to be 60 million, but it's only going to be worth $50 million on day one, that's a bad investment. Well, no, you're building a church, right? So what you're building is a location where you can go there. So it could be, and now I see RSL Life Care having where it's a veteran lounge there. There might be a part there where we might have that. Getting back to that, we've seen RSL National at the moment having putting out papers on national security. So there might be a 6 p.m. Tuesday night. There's a like a speaker's corner, like lounge there, where corporates will come in there, listen to commanders about vision of Australia's national security. Okay, and then at the top there might be a club limited. They might, unless you've got 100 poker machines or more, there's no point in it. But a club might come in there and say, look, we'll do the top 2 floors. There'll be a restaurant and a nice bar, and it's a location. And we've got people going there. We've got VC, I call it the VCBC, but I'm used to that from the early days. But the VBC, you'll have a lounge. They might be looking at that modern to say, I'm not saying that we have a podcast hub, but there could be a location in there for AVL. So, you travel to the city, Pete. We travel to the city. I use the AICD lounge. I use the Law Society, but I'd prefer to go to something that's like an Anzac
Home of the
House.
veteran, man.
And go there and just go, and then I can collab and go, hey, Pete, what are you doing? Oh, mate, we're doing this. And then I'm like, what do you do for business? Oh, and that's what you've created here. And I admire you, Pete, on what you've created with this platform as well.
Yeah, it's critical what you're saying also, Pete, with that hub, because transitioning from defence is hard. Dealing with injuries, identity, loss of career, and starting small business is hard. There's no time to yourself. You've really got to balance it out. It's a lonely journey, and it's always good to have a hub like that where other veterans in that same circumstance can come together and support each other and grow and learn together and open that community up. And I think that's the final hurdle of RSL, attracting that younger cohort of members in to be part of something bigger than themselves.
One of the things that I am a single issue zealot on supporting the veteran community through veteran enterprise, and entrepreneurship. Yep. And I think if we've got $1 billion worth of assets in RSL, again, this is not, when I put my commercial or business hat on, this is not about charity or donations or grants or gifts, but is there a space for RSL to potentially become equity holders in veteran-owned business as a revenue source? Like Paul, you talked about a development for property. Is there a veteran business fund?
So from a legal point of view, well, 2 things. One is, we assist a lot of businesses in that. I've assisted recently a business, like a startup. It's a veteran business, and there's a not-for-profit that has become a shareholder. And it's no different to obviously any dividends or profit has to go to their charitable purpose, but they're fine. Yep. But it's no different to a charity owning a building and renting it out. Okay. Yeah. So there is scope to do that. And what I think with the RSL is, and what the RSL has done, I suppose, is what you have to do is, if you're at the top, you have to create opportunities and sub-branches. The richer ones do like helping the ones without money. Yep. But the frustration they have is the people with the 20 or 30 million, they don't know where to go. If there's an ability where sub-branches can go, right, we want to invest in that development, or we're going to collab or do a joint venture. Why is it you're seeing now with clubs, some clubs in New South Wales, the old traditional model was a club would basically, unless you've got 100 pokies, you're not going to make money. But there's some clubs at the moment that are investing in new startups in green, whatever it may be, not just here but overseas, because what happens is that just increases their profit for their charitable purpose or their for-profit business. So that means that they can give more to the community. So and
again, single issue zealot here. I'm all about supporting veterans by giving them jobs through veteran-owned businesses and creating, like you guys, veteran-owned business. How many veterans do you employ? I'm sure there's a couple.
We've actually got a law student at the moment. She's currently serving the Navy. Yeah. So we're going to look at giving her an opportunity, because we signed up to the veteran, unlike RSL, we've signed up to the Prime Minister's veteran employment commitment, and all our policies, this is one of the clashes I had with RSL. I said, all your policies don't comply with that. So I had to redo with our business. We went to the guidelines. If anyone's out there, look at the veteran employment commitment. I think it's we're also a Defence Force Reserve supporter. They're just simple things. And what they do, they have great insight, and our policies have to align with that. Even my non-veteran staff, I've just had a new personal injury experienced person come in here. So we do all types of personal injury. It's great and I've got more capability now with that. I had to give her like a Soldier's 5 and an introduction. I said, read parts of this, the Royal Commission. Look at this video. You know, it's kind of like a little mini boot camp to go understand that whilst veteran clients might be only a part of my business, they're an important part. And it's just understanding that they're the same as everyone else. It's just that they put a uniform on. And so, and then their experiences may have varied. And that's what it is. So, yeah.
I just want to share something about the veteran employment program. Again, I think it's brilliant. I think it's fantastic. But what we're repcharging or fighting for with VBC is a veteran procurement program. You know, yes, veterans are great employees, but how about we push the narrative that veterans are great business owners? You know, like it is the same thing. And I'm not looking at it necessarily as a point of preference. You know, we don't need a pat on the head. Your poor veteran will throw you a bone by giving you a contract. Use us as the point of difference because we are great business owners, and you know, and it should be the character and the commitment and the person behind the business that becomes our point of difference. I want to wrap with a couple of thoughts. Number one, if you're out there listening, whatever you do, don't give up on RSL yet. I hope that we, as look, I'm 50, I'm not that young anymore, but as one of the younger or sort of modern war veterans, please let's not become what happened to them. You know, the RSL movement did not embrace the Vietnam or the new generation that comes through. I am actively feeling it within my own sub-branch community that the older generation is not welcoming or supporting younger veterans or their ideas. But number one, don't become them when we're older, you know, when we're in those positions, and be the same, you know, just this perpetual cycle of nonsense. I really feel that from a veteran community, particularly within RSL, let's just try and be humble, you know, and patient, and go back to what your point you said before, Mick, is that we're all veterans. And the problem is we're all so passionate about caring, but we've all just got our little tangents. And when we're outside of this structured command structure where you're basically told to get in line and you can't, we've all got our little ideas. And I think we have that when we come back and see we've got so much more in common than we do apart, I think the movement can change, but it's going to come from a point of humility, a point of respect across all members, you know, no matter where they are, but get involved, because we do have the opportunity to create a new legacy and empower these assets that we're caretaking for the next 100, 200, 500 years.
Can I add one thing to that, Pete?
Go for it.
I still, you know, credit all of the sub-branches out there. There are some amazing members doing amazing work, and they're struggling to understand. They want to reach out. So if you're a young veteran, go and join. Yeah. I don't think generationally the issues that they've faced, other than some more broader societal issues, are any different. They've had the hard yards transitioning. They've had marriage breakups. They've run businesses. They're a wealth of knowledge. And I think to any young veteran looking to get out, become involved on a executive for a sub-branch, get some of those critical bridging skills. They might have the course or the university or TAFE course. Go and get involved in that organisation. It is ripe for opportunity. But I think I was told by the president of Queensland RSL, Stephen Day, I think he's a fantastic, brilliant mind and a smart fella. He said, you've got to be involved, and you'll lose a layer of skin each week with something like RSL, but you have to get out before you become a skeleton. Yeah. I think we've learned that lesson. But it is a great organisation that's got a lot to offer people. So, yeah, get involved.
For anyone that's interested in, you know, joining my vision and a collective vision of, you know, some of the younger people in my sub-branch, to create a place of purpose in the heart of Sydney, where we become the veteran home in the heart of our biggest city, then I'm going to throw the links into joining Combined RSL sub-branch into the chat. Come along, get involved. We do want to have an opportunity for people to really contribute. On that. Well, mate, what I want to do is I'm going to wrap now by just leaving on a couple of thoughts. No one gets it right. Potentially, maybe you guys could have done things differently. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not here to judge that. What I am here to say is that You guys have served. You guys have put immense hours of your personal time away from your families, away from your business, of the things that matter most in life, to serve the community. And I just want to encourage anyone who's got an opinion about Paul or Mick. No, they're not perfect. They're not getting it right every time, but at least pay them the courtesy of reaching out and asking them themselves. So, lads, thanks for having
I'll have a beer with anyone or a
Yeah.
coffee. So just if you want, I'll come out to wherever you want, and you can ask me anything and everything. So yeah.
And let's not suppress ideas. Let's not suppress
No.
visions and other tangents. Yes, I am a single issue zealot, and I believe that veteran enterprise will save the world. However, I'm not right for everybody. So I just want to, thank you guys for, your contribution and service and the time away from your families. And thanks for coming on and having a yarn.
Thanks for having us, Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Thanks for everything.
Pleasure. Rightio. So, as I mentioned, they do cause a bit of fuss, these lads, that they've been in the newspaper and the telly more times than I'd ever like to in my life. But I think, one of the things I take away from today is Mick and Paul are both people of purpose. They're both people of passion who fundamentally, through their experiences, and let's not forget about the point that we focus on here. We are all veterans from a shared experience. And that's what we need to come back to and focus on more, where we are alike than where we're apart. But lads, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Pete. Take care, everyone.
Right. It's Pete Liston. I'm going to wrap this episode of the VBC pod.